So ever since I was a little girl, I always wanted to be a veterinarian. My dad is a doctor, and we've always had a bunch of animals all over the house, and I've always had an affinity for nature and animals. So I went to NC State for undergrad. I got my degree in zoology, and after got a job at the College of Veterinary Medicine in the Department of Laboratory Animal Resources as a veterinary technician. At this time, I was living with my boyfriend, who I'd been dating for a solid 5 years, and our best friend, and everything was just grand and wonderful. And then my boyfriend and I broke up. And it wouldn't have been so bad, maybe, but we had just signed a lease, and we were still living together for like a solid 9 months after that. And he also immediately got a new girlfriend. So it was at this time where I entered what I call my quarter-life crisis. I tried to be okay. I really did. I have this mentality that whatever's meant to happen will happen. So when this happened, I was like, okay, it's okay. This is meant to be, just trying to be okay. But little by little, like, I was crying all the time. And even though I was trying to be okay, I just wasn't. And usually I'm really good in my job. I do well, and but I was slipping. And it got to the point where one day it was really bad, and my supervisor called me in and was like, you need to take a break, go home, take the rest of the week off. And I said, okay, all right, I understood. So I went home. That day I had planned to go for a walk with one of my good friends at the lake nearby. So she came and picked me up early, and she was driving. And as we were driving to the lake, I looked out the window, and I happened to catch a glance of this martial arts school. It says Kung Fu Center, just in a second. And having been so unstable, I already had this mentality that I was like, okay, I need to find something to do that's going to give me some stability. So I'm like, okay, maybe music, maybe I could do the piano or martial arts. I don't know. I didn't know. And I wasn't trying to figure it out. But when I saw this sign, it was like, it was a sign, right? So I went back the next day, and the master, he was really kind. He was like, yeah, come try. And that's all I needed. I tried out, and thus ignited my passion. I became really hardcore about it. I mean, I was there 6 days a week, sometimes training 3 to 4 hours a day. Like, this became the big new love of my life. So I trained there for about 2 years, 2.5 years. And while I was living and training, at one point, so being unable to not be a student anymore, I always loved taking classes. I kept taking classes after graduation. So it would be like one class a semester or a year. And after one of these classes, I happened to see on the, it was a sign on something. It was on the wall. I'm looking for words. It was a sign on the wall. And it was a flyer for a study abroad in plants and culture, a study abroad in China. And, having the zoology and being just starting to do Chinese martial arts, I was like, yes, I want to do this, right? So I applied for the trip, and I applied for a scholarship, and I got it. I got both. And then I found out later that the lady who's running the program, this class, the professor, she was actually the mother of one of my classmates at the Kung Fu Center, which I thought was really cool. So I went on this trip. It was 3 weeks. We studied plants, we ate amazing food, we ran around the mountains, and I fell in love. I fell in love with China. And I was like, I need to figure out how to get back here. Right? How am I going to get back here? And my teacher said, have you ever thought about teaching in China? And no, I hadn't. But there we go. So I spent the next year getting my TESOL certificate, got my TESOL certificate, and promptly after that, I found a job back in China. So this job was at an international high school in Suzhou, which, if anybody knows where Suzhou is, it's about half an hour away from Shanghai. I went over there and I spent 3 years teaching. And it was an awesome experience. I loved it. There are many, many things I love about China. It's my second home. The people are really wonderful. I love Chinese food. I was studying Mandarin. Mandarin is my favorite language. However, in all this time that I was there, having a great time and enjoying the experience, my training was dwindling. And this was my passion. You know, this is what kept me stable and driven in life. So then I had to figure out, okay, I need to get back to it. It's like, and not just, you know, an after-school class, I need to get back to training. So after my second year in second year of teaching, I found a school out in Yunnan province, which is in West China, Southwest China, very close to like Thailand and Southeast Asia. And I went out there for 3 weeks, and it was an awesome experience. I was really, really love it, need to get back here, need to figure out how to get back here. And so, but I couldn't at that time. I still had 1 more year of teaching left, and on top of that, I had met a boy. And we had started this relationship, and so we had been talking, and I told him about my dream, and he also told me about his dream. So this boy is really into bicycle riding. His dream is to ride bicycle from Belgium to China, right? So we're like, okay, let's combine these dreams. Okay, we're going to ride from Belgium to China, and then we're going to go to Kung Fu school for however long, you know, we could afford to do it. And so I finished my 3rd year, and he had been working in Rwanda at the time, but he wasn't feeling that job so much. He had been there about 6 months. He was like, okay, I'm done here too. And so we got married, and then we started our honeymoon. Well, don't start a bike trip in Europe in October because it gets cold. So we started in October, and by December, we were in Serbia, and it was snowing, and it was miserable. And especially because we had been camping. So, like, when we would wake up in the morning, it would be frozen in our tent just because of the condensation of us breathing. And on top of that, if you've ever ridden a bike in really, really cold weather, there is no glove or shoe, or at least one that I could find that will protect your limbs from that piercing cold wind. So yeah, it was a bit miserable. And we're like, okay, what are we going to do? Well, I had been applying for a scholarship to a Kung Fu school in China. It was the same one I went to the first time, and I got it. And I found out that it was time sensitive. So the owner, he was like, you really got to get here before, you know, January, otherwise your scholarship's gone. I'm like, okay, great. And we had been staying with another couple of people who had also been traveling by bicycle, and they were like, why don't you go to Southeast Asia? Because they had been to Southeast Asia, and you know, they said it was a wonderful experience. All right, let's do that. Instead of wasting time trying to fight the cold, although I was already ready to do it. I was looking at horse farms in Bulgaria. I would have been happy with that as well. But it didn't happen that way. We wanted to keep riding before I got to Kung Fu school, before we got to Kung Fu school. So we packed our stuff up and we flew to Singapore and we started riding north. So we went from Singapore through Malaysia and up into Thailand. And when we got there, we had to deal with the visa issues for China. So it wasn't so easy. It took me about a month, and I ended up having to fly back home to deal with it. But after about a month, I got my visa and I went back to China, back to the Kung Fu school. My husband, he had more difficulties, so he spent about 3 months in Thailand instead. And so then, there we were. We were at the Kung Fu school, finally at the Kung Fu school. And thankfully, because this Kung Fu school is one of the most important experiences I've ever had in my life. My quarter-life crisis, it was dark and it was really hard, but this was hard in a whole different way. Physically, like if anybody knows anything about the Chinese martial arts, and specifically Shaolin martial arts, these people train crazy intensely. It's the hardest physical training I've ever had. And if you've ever done intensive physical training, you know that it can also get to you psychologically. And I spent probably the first 3 weeks crying because it was so hard. And you just go through this feeling that you're like angry at yourself. Like, how did I let myself get this weak? And I can't keep up. I'm always last. And I'm so, No, but then little by little, you get stronger, After some time, you start seeing these improvements, and you're no longer the last one anymore, and you're no longer, you don't have blisters that are popping under your blisters from bear crawling down mountains, and you become stronger physically, and then you also become stronger in your head. Like, you start realizing that you can handle it and how you can handle it, and that was a whole new strength in my life that I found that I never had before, and now I have in everything that I do. So we were there for 8 months, but after 8 months of not working and traveling, you run out of money sometime, right? So we were also just kind of tired. I'm not an early bird. I had to wake up at 5 a.m. every morning to start intensive training. Like, I guess if there's any way to wake up and start the day, training is a good way, but 5 a.m. is rough. So yeah, we were done, and my scholarship was already running out. So we went to live in my husband's home. He's from Belgium, and I was there for a couple months, and then I came home for a visit. I hadn't been home in a little while. I came home to visit. And when I was going to return back to Belgium, my plane was delayed. And so to not have to spend the night in an airport, I was like, you know what? I'll hang out in Raleigh. I miss my friends, and I haven't seen my master in a while. So I'm going to stay a couple nights. So I got a hotel, and the next day I went to go visit my master. It had been maybe 1.5 years or 2 years since I had seen him. So when I went to go visit him, hey, how you doing? How's everything? Good to see you. So happy. And he's like, I want to retire. Okay. I want to go back to China. Okay. Okay, what about the school? He's like, I don't know. Maybe I'll just close it. And I couldn't let that happen. This school was everything to me for, a really, really critical time in my life. And I was like, okay, well, I see what I need to do. Let me talk to my husband, let me talk to my family. So I did. I talked to my husband, I talked to my parents. They were on board. I had their full support. So by, that was February. By April, I came back here. I came back alone because we had to deal with more visa situations with my husband. And by July 1st, I was in full custody of my master's Kung Fu, which was which is now my Kung Fu school. So after 5 years, 5 years of chasing my big love in life, I had returned home to the very school that started the entire adventure. Well, thus beginning my next big adventure as a Kung Fu teacher and entrepreneur that I'm still living today.